are you different from anybody else who does the similar thing as you? It's like, for example, like Marlen, another podcast booking agent, another podcast strategist, or what is my category of one? And my category of one for me is I am the creator of podcast interview leverage method and the community of the podcast conversion lab. So nobody else is exactly that creator of that method and that community. So it's only me. I'm only one in my category. That is much more easy to remember that she was, I think, another booking agent, and that happens a lot with positioning online. People like just use words that they're another speaker, another author, another strategist, and people won't remember them because they don't bring out their unique methodology, their unique framework, their unique creator of.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Marlen Kakkori. She is the founder of Marlen Marketing, where she helps founders and experts turn podcast interviews into client relationships, not just visibility. She focuses on the missing link between connection and conversion, showing how conversations on podcasts can evolve into trust, demand, and revenue. Her work sits at the intersection of human connection and client acquisition. She also founded the Podcast Conversion Lab community and contributed to the best-selling book, Today's Inspired Leader, Stories of Impact, Community, and Legacy, Volume 6. Congrats on the Podcast Conversion Lab and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on the show because it's kind of a meta topic about how to do a good podcast interview while you're on a podcast, but it is something that I think is a common stumble point for a lot of founders or executives where they go on to a show expecting to be presenting themselves a certain way and doesn't quite come across. It doesn't have the effect they intended. So what are some of the ways you've seen people like make mistakes, or how do you recommend people approach being a guest on a podcast?
The money is left on the table very often because people just focus on recording the interview, but where the real leverage is what happens after it. I focus on my work coaching my clients that leverage the host relationship. There are so many tiny things like thanking the host after the recording, already tagging the host on social media and building buzz around the show you are going to get your episode aired. It's going more deep, like what else can I do for a host who puts all the efforts to produce the show? Can I recommend other guests for him, any business leads? Can we do anything else great together as potential business partners? And actually debriefing how our interview went, what feedback we can give to each other. And all of this debriefing and how can we help each other part is often missed. So I say to people, don't guess and ghost. The leverage is what happens afterwards. And that's what I'm really focusing on when I talk to my clients.
Yeah, I can see that being a common mistake, that if people are already operating in a very transactional mindset with their businesses and their clients, that if they're on a podcast and they think, oh, it's just whatever happens between the time the recording starts and ends, that's the real value. I'm missing a much bigger picture of the prep and helping promote and the relationships you can build with the people on the podcast. So what are some of the recommendations for, you mentioned a lot of things people can do, but it is are there any kind of tips or suggestions you have for people to go about those tasks, or what are some of the successes you've seen when people apply these suggestions effectively.
Yes, I want to give one example about the first point where I went to Holly Jean Jackson show, The Inspiration Contagion, and I didn't get any leads from the audience. But as I developed a relationship with Holly, she invited me to her referral network, and she did tons of introductions. So that's where I got leads who I had got to get discovery calls afterwards. So for me, totally the money was inside a host relationship, not about the audience itself. It was great experience. I get content, and the content also leads up to my second point, which is that it helped me to start building my trust in the internet. You know, I actually, her interview was one of my first ones, and I added it to my school community. I added it to my social media. It's the content repurposing that is very important part that happens afterwards. And also many people don't know how to do it well. There is a lot of, there's people who don't do it at all, and some people who do it a little bit, and some do it very badly with some AI. So there's ways to actually, you know, make sure you actually tag the host when you do the content repurposing, not just AI posting for you, and you haven't checked if the host is mentioned and the show where you went, to give credit to the host. And really the repurposing is where people start feeling like it's not that means that you go to the show, you get directly tons of clients who just listen and they want to buy from you. It's just one point of contact. So people hear that you are expert in this field, and then they start referring you. Like, I've seen this Marlen in so many shows talking on podcasts. I think she's expert in podcast guesting. You know, it is part of the process to start people, you know, getting you, the reception of you as a trusted advisor on one topic. And that's the real goal. And for example, for me, when I was looking at business coach for me, I listened many podcasts about business, and I heard, oh, there's this lady, Shoshana Raven, showing up in different shows talking about business coaching. And I was like, okay, I should check out her own podcast. And then I went to her programs, first free programs and finally paid programs. You know, it is, in my eyes, she was trusted expert of business coaching because I saw her in many podcasts. So that's the way, like step by step, people, it's not that I will buy from the first show you go, it is more that they start slowly getting the understanding that she is the expert because she goes to podcasts and talks about this specific topic. Which actually, yeah, you have a question about it?
No, I was saying it makes sense that it's really about understanding that the value comes from the longer investment and being more, the visibility you get from being on multiple shows, but it's the same topic, versus jumping on one and expecting it to deliver a bunch of referrals or leads, and that the strategy for growing visibility and getting value from podcasting is a lot like any other marketing channel, where it's about the repetition and the building awareness first, and having people be familiar with you and feel like they can know who you are when you're on these shows talking about the topics that you're focusing on, or the topic you're focusing on. And so I think it is a common mistake, like you kind of mentioned, that people thinking they can just do a couple quick podcasts and get a bunch of ROI from it, instead of understanding that it has to be a longer term consistent habit of guesting a variety of shows that have similar audiences, and you're talking about the same sort of thing, so that you become known, and then people will have that familiarity, because that's what it takes to build the trust that you need to get those referrals or those leads.
And speaker trainers say that it takes around like 40 shows to practice before you actually become eligible for good, like big media shows. Because it's really, you get to hone your craft, how you speak, what stories you bring, and how you work on your sound bites. All of this, it takes time and practice. So really, that's why it's important to also, expect getting real results after you've been more than 40 shows, because you are getting better, unless you have been a professional speaker on stage before. So that's one part of it.
Yeah, I think that having that understanding that it's going to take 40 episodes to get good at speaking. If you're coming from no background in speaking, I can say that it would take that long, especially if it's a live podcast or like a live stream sort of thing where there's no chance to really edit it. That can be quite nerve-wracking, and there's a whole skill set to public speaking that a lot of even successful entrepreneurs are not great at that particular muscle. And so if you're expecting to get results from podcasting, you do have to work out that muscle. Like it sounds like 40 is a good number. That if once you reach that point, you'll be at a certain echelon of skill or proficiency that you can expect to see some returns. But it is, I think, a lot more work than people realize to get good at this sort of skill.
And I can give one more recommendation, actually. It's not, I don't know if it's showing, but this is called Teach to Sell book from Dan Roshan. He talks about that in the whole book for salespeople, that the goal to get sales, you need to learn to teach, and that podcast is perfect place for this, to practice the teach skill. So you learn how to close the sales, and then because the end of the goal for your business is to get sales, but to get there, teaching or speaking is the best way to reach that, and really the only way. And I want to say that, but there's also this very important part in the speaking market overall, is like a lot of long bios and credentials, what you have done, and podcast hosts are busy. They don't have time to read very long, bios when you pitch yourself or somebody pitches you. So what I'm focused at, what I had learned from, for example, the Shoshana Raven I mentioned, a category of one positioning. Also, Carrie James from Brand Alchemy talks about niche of one. So this is really what I work with my clients on, is how are you different from anybody else who does a similar thing as you? It's like, for example, like Marlen, another podcast booking agent, another podcast strategist, or what is my category of one? And my category of one for me is I am the creator of podcast interview leverage method and the community of the podcast conversion lab. So nobody else is exactly that creator of that method and that community. So it's only me. I'm only one in my category. That is much more easy to remember that she was, I think, another booking agent, and that happens a lot with positioning online. People just use words that they're another speaker, another author, another strategist, and people won't remember them because they don't bring out their unique methodology, their unique framework, their unique creator of.
Yeah, I think that leads to just a larger misunderstanding of what a personal brand is, and how it's not enough to just include a job title or a position or like a business category in there, because there are so many people out there that do the same sort of things. So really having something about who you are that is your differentiator, that's tied to not what you do, but who you are and why you do it, because that's the stuff that can't easily be replicated, or if people try to replicate it, it's not genuine, and people can tell that it's a facade pretty quickly. And so
yes,
trying to stand out, you need to have that personal differentiation, not just the business differentiation, because the business one's almost never going to be differentiated in the way you like to think.
Yes, and the human differentiation, there's no other. And Marlen, who was born in Sweden, half Estonian, Finnish, lived in Turkey, France, and Spain, now lives in Mexico, and is focused on podcast guesting. So it's like my whole story is my personal brand. There's nobody like that.
Yeah, I think also with if you're trying to build trust with an audience or with people in an audience, the more you can be putting your actual self out on these interviews and connecting with the audience and talking more about who you are as a human being, not just as a doer of a certain like service or maker of a certain product, but actually the person behind the professional is even more important than ever, because that is what is people are really going to resonate with, because you'll inevitably be talking about the times you made mistakes or your flaws or your challenges and the parts where you're not super polished and perfect and successful. And even though those can be challenging to talk about, especially if it's something that's going to be posted online and basically be stuck there forever once it's up. But those sorts of stories are the ones that actually build that deeper level of trust and help you stand out to your audience, because it's not just, oh, this person who does the thing, but oh, there's someone who's been through an experience like me and is like that I've been through, and who cares about the same sort of things about the like people or community or humanity or the industry I'm in, or whatever common values you share. Talking about those, well, it may seem like, oh, this is going to alienate people. It's like, well, the ones you'd alienate are the ones you want to work with anyway. So really showing up and being genuine and human is the way to build that trust quickly.
Yeah, and sharing your big why, like you also say, it's beautiful. Like why I work with podcasts. I remember when I was like, I think 15, 16, somebody came to our school and gave us a little speech about how people should get out of their comfort zone to get the bigger comfort zone in life. And I mean, that was kind of so impactful. That's why I went to debating clubs and speaking Toastmasters and all of this, because sometimes a big idea can inspire a whole life path for somebody. So I love podcasts. It's a authentic way, no AI, real human sharing their why behind their businesses, their lives, and this way can inspire a listener. And inspiration is also part of sales. If you're inspired, you want to take an action. So really, that's why I'm in the podcast world.
Yeah, you mentioned being part of Toastmasters, and we had talked about how it does take a lot of reps to be proficient at being on a podcast in order to get more visibility or more like invited on more shows, for example. So what are some of the other suggestions you have for people that want to be on podcasts or identified that they can need to improve their skills? What are some of the things they can do besides being on podcasts that would help them improve that skill set?
Yes, there are definitely those speaking practice clubs like Toastmasters out there. Then there's even courses on how to be a great podcast guest. In my community, I also have the interview leverage method course available. I know other people in the field of business and podcasting who do courses and that online. And then there's International Speakers Network, where you can go and learn, and by one of my partners, Liza Reed, for example. So there's just ways where speakers, I think, achieve is when people also meet weekly to practice speaking on business context. They do like Toastmasters for business. I think there are a couple of speaker trainers who do like Toastmasters for business communities in out there. So finding the right community to practice is a best place as well. And also as taking some course information of how to prepare for the show, what to do during the show, what to do after the show to actually leverage the experience.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of great resources out there. And yeah, I'm part of a Toastmasters group for a number of years, and it's definitely helped me with my speaking. And it's the sort of thing that you often don't realize how much room you have to grow when it comes like to speaking, because everyone talks for the most part. And so, but the actual difference between a casual conversation and a professional one, or showing up on a show and speaking in a way where you're trying to build that trust and show expertise and impress people, is a very different skill set. And having the ability to manage the nerves and the anxiety that can come along with public speaking is a whole nother subset of skills that, if you're not consciously building them, it's very hard to have those come across naturally. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, Marlen. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you want to connect with either of us, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.